Hey everyone, welcome to a new installment of Collider Connected. Today I am thrilled to be joined by cinematographer Greig Fraser. He has worked on a ton of fantastic films, Zero Dark 30, Foxcatcher, Rogue One, upcoming Dune and the Batman. He also worked on The Mandalorian. We're just going to kind of be digging into his career, kind of talking about his craft, talking about cinematography and films and things we love. We're all, kind of quarantined together, but we feel like Collider Connected is kind of a nice, fun way to feel a little bit more connected and to celebrate the things that, we're here to enjoy and the things that we love, which are movies and television. So, Greig, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How are you holding up?
Great. And taking the good with the bad. A lot of good. It's time for reflection and introspection and time with family, and it's something the film industry is not always the best at providing a person, which is balance, work-life balance.
Yeah.
So to try and find that at home is awesome.
Yeah. And time to catch up on movies, I assume.
No.
A lot. No?
Not for me, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, it's funny because I thought that would be the case, and I thought after a week or two I'd be in the world of watching everything I missed out on, but I just don't have the time. Or I haven't watched a single thing, which is actually, I'll be frank with you, looking at multiple images every day for like the last 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I'm liking the solitude, the visual solitude.
Yeah. Nice to read a book or just kind of see the real world for one.
Learn how to build a house. I don't know. Just wow. YouTube's simple stuff like that.
Awesome. As I said, I'm a huge fan of your work, and I have been for a long time. And so I'm thrilled to get to talk to you. I'm kind of curious. I mean, were you someone who was always into film growing up, or was film something that kind of came about as you started kind of studying?
No, I think as a kid, as a teenager, I was definitely always into the favorite movies that I had. That like a lot of people of my generation had the Star Wars and the films in the early '80s that people really enjoyed. The Lost Boys and stuff like that. So definitely enjoyed that. And I remember as a 10-year-old wanting to make a movie on a friend's farm and not realizing how hard it could be, and we never really got it off the ground, unfortunately, but having a desire to make a little movie, but not necessarily having a big desire to become a DP or a director or a this or that. I sort of found my feet in high school, and that I became a photographer, and I really enjoyed taking photographs, and studied at college. But then started working as a photographer and realizing that wasn't the business that I kind of was good for, because, photographers tend to work in isolation generally. And I was more of a social being that I like to throw ideas off people and have them come back better than I put them out there, or cut down or improved, or the idea of just the backwards and forwards was very appealing. So when I kind of stumbled upon the film business, knowing that I could use these skills as a photographer and then translate them to making movies, it kind of was the best of both worlds. So I kind of found my future and went with it.
That's awesome. Well, one of your first big films was working with Jane Campion on Bright Star, which I imagine was pretty remarkable experience. What was that kind of like, stepping into that world and then kind of translating obviously cinematography is different from still photography in that you're working with a moving image. So yes. Was that something that came pretty quickly as you were working on your early films, or did you kind of have to find your way into it?
Yeah, it did. I sort of the way I see it is everybody that I work with, from directors to gaffers to grips to producers, I learn from, and I learn what they knew, and I took pretty much all that combined knowledge. I still feel like I do learn every day from the people that I work with. Working with someone like Jane, that definitely wasn't my first movie, but to work with someone like Jane was a different working experience to, say, the previous few movies that I'd done. And it was very fantastic to work with someone with such expertise, and so humble and with such a clear vision. Because Jane was never, it's not Jane's way or the highway, but ultimately she has a vision for a movie. And if you come into it and you're not coming into it from the right direction, then she'll slowly nudge you into the right direction. Like she's a softly character. And she does the same with her actors too. It's about love. It's about conquering with love as opposed to with an iron fist. Which I find really fantastic when directors do that. It's not the only way to do it. There are other ways, but I find it very respectful and fantastic when a director uses a soft glove approach to they'll always get their way, and if they don't get their way, then you'll know about it. And but it's nice to see that the way that someone can manipulate through being gentle.
Well, and it's a collaboration. I mean, I imagine, you're there to do a job as the cinematographer to, help create the visual world of the film, but ultimately it's the director's vision. So I imagine there's some push and pull, and some directors are a little more opinionated about what they want or specific about what they want than others.
Yep. And some will allow you more visual flexibility and more freedom. There's no perfect director in that sense. Like I love hearing stories about how, say, someone like David Fincher is so precise with his vision, so precise to the point of multiple takes if the camera doesn't get quite like. I love that level of precision. But on the flip side, you have other directors who don't work like that. They're a little bit more kind of fly on the wall, a bit more reportage. Paul Greengrass and Catherine Bigelow, and and I love that too. So for me as a DP, one of the enjoyable parts of my world is it's kind of morphing and swaying to suit the director. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a pushover visually either. Like I don't, I will take the lead if I feel like together we've come up with a look or a feel for a movie, and something's not living up to that, or it's not living up to the standard that we all have worked towards, or I will definitely be very strong opinioned about things like that. But to take my style and ride roughshod over a director is not really my style. I like to listen to them, like to hear what they want, reference together, and then together we work on achieving their goal.
Another film that you worked on kind of around that same time or fairly early on that was a pretty big project was Let Me In, which is this remake of a beloved film, but also Matt Reeves. I believe he had done Cloverfield at that point, right?
That's correct.
So and Let Me In is a very different film. So what were kind of those conversations like about finding the style of that film? Because I think it's gorgeous.
Well, that film, again, you probably need to talk to Matt specifically about that. Was less of a remake of the Swedish movie and more of a American film of the book. There might have been some similarities. I don't know the Swedish version well enough to know what those similarities were. But the book's a very, very strong, strongly defined book. So I believe it was based on that as opposed to a remake. But one of the first conversations Matt and I had about that was I said to Matt, I haven't seen the Swedish version, and together we agreed that I should not see the Swedish version because Hoyt had shot it in such a defined way, in such a strongly defined way, that the idea of basing any of the visuals, because again, it's visual storytelling is often subconscious as it is conscious. Like you might have an idea for something, not knowing where it's come from, but actually it's come from your 30 years of watching movies and your 3 months of referencing stills photographers for this job. Like it's put into a blender in your brain, and it what you come out with is a combination of those things. So we decided very early on that we would not visually reference that and not make it just so visually it was its own thing. Um, that film very much is about isolation, and about these characters being by themselves but together when they're together. So a lot of the cinematography represented that. The moves were slower. They didn't. It was more plotting. The camera work was a little bit more. The way I described it to, particularly on that one, to the camera operator at that time was, imagine the camera's just taken 3 codeine pills. You're a little bit slow. If someone's walking across the frame, you don't keep up with them. You start to move with them, but the camera's moving slower than the character. So the camera is kind of either locked into the character when you're following and you're in their head, or if it's not, you're kind of watching it as a god figure, as a godlike figure. And so that you're not feeling the hand of the operator behind the lens.
That's awesome. I love that movie so much. I think it was really striking. It's testament to the work that you guys did, that I think people who loved the original also loved this version, and it kind of showed how you can do new adaptation and not just kind of repeat the same beats of the existing.
I mean, Matt's an incredible director. I think we've all seen the Apes films, and
yeah,
I don't know, for somebody to make you feel how you feel watching an animal, an ape. I don't know. There's a lot of skill there that's required in doing that. It's not just. Obviously, casting is a big part of it, but it's the work of a very, very, very good director to have you find emotion in things that are innately unemotional. I'm talking about animals. Apes. I mean, he did a brilliant job of that. So yeah, I'm excited to be working with him currently on Batman.
Yeah. How is that going?
Awesome.
What are you allowed to say about the Batman?
Nothing. But I can tell you what I will tell you is what some of the actors have gone away and said. It is a character-based movie about the characters, about Andy Serkis's character and Rob Pattinson's character, and it's a very, very good script. I mean, like all of Matt's scripts, it's very good. It's very well thought out, and it's we're having a ball making it. We're doing our best to, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure.
a little bit.
I don't think Matt takes non-pressured movies. Like to do the American version of Let the Right One In, like that's a huge pressure. To do the Apes movies, which I think there's a lot of people have a lot of vested interest in, there's a lot of pressure. To do a Batman is a lot of pressure. He's gutsy. He's a gutsy director.
I mean, you may or may not be able to say anything, but I mean, Batman movies are dark, but there are different versions of dark. I was wondering I mean, we've seen the teaser footage, which I know you shot, and we've seen the photographs, which I believe you also shot. Is that kind of indicative of, or maybe you didn't shoot the Batman?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes.
Is that kind of indicative of kind of the feel of the world? I mean, you're coming off the Dark Knight trilogy, which was hyper realistic with Wally Pfister's cinematography, and then Zack Snyder's, which was a little more heightened. Is there anything you can say about kind of I guess like the darkness, like what is darkness in this Batman film?
It's a good question, and it's a question we ask ourselves. Like the film, I can't talk specifically, of course. There's darkness in the character for sure, and we need to create a mood, which is obvious. It's a Batman film, so but I don't think it's going to be oppressively dark in terms of visually, because that's not what we're trying to. We're not trying to have a competition about who can go the darkest of the darkest of the darkest. Like we're trying to create intrigue. Like I love the way some of the comics look and the graphic novels, and you can see relatively quite clearly those in those graphic novels. So yeah, I can't be too specific. So when it comes out, we should talk about it, because it's I'm having a ball writing it. Like it's hard work, it's hard work, but it's so rewarding.
I believe you're using the RE65 on that. Are you using IMAX at all?
We're not using the RE65.
Oh, okay.
No,
That was
no,
on my IMDb, so that can be
no,
correct.
that's incorrect.
Okay, great. Well,
I mean, actually, so we might have one or two of those cameras, but that's not the format we're shooting on. So,
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you say the format, or is that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally.
I never quite know how much I can say, like,
Yeah.
because I love not knowing stuff about a movie too. You know, and I love not knowing. I mean, the formats obviously it's not anything, but even when we're doing Star Wars, you know, Ryan was shooting Last Jedi in the studio next door, and as he'd walk past the studio door, I'd try and not see in. I deliberately, anytime I heard anyone over talking about what the story was or what they were cut, I deliberately didn't listen in because I just wanted to enjoy that for, you know, as a fresh viewer.
Yeah. Well, kind of to go back, I mean, we were talking about Let Me In. Around that time, you also worked with Catherine Bigelow on Zero Dark 30. And I remember when that film was under production, it was very secretive, probably for different reasons. But I think that's a terrific film. And I think a lot of the work that you did on that film is very striking, especially as it relates to point of view with Maya, and then also obviously the kind of night vision goggle sequence. What was that experience like for you?
It's an amazing film to shoot. You know, I was really interested in that whole process actually. You know, when the raid actually happened, I was glued, you know, to the news. It was such as news reports were coming out. I mean, what a great story! Like they sneak into friendly territory and crash and get the guy who's not friendly, and like what a great story. So
Yeah.
When the news was coming out about it, I was fully I was just soaking it up. So to read that script was incredible because, like, scripts intrinsically I find hard to read. I think, you know, the scene setting, the day, there's a whole heap of things you need to take in as you're reading, and as opposed to just the story. And I found that script just a page turner, the same as Let Me In. Like, just I couldn't stop reading it. It was a fantastic, exciting read. I mean, a really well written script by Mark Bowl. So it was a very well written script, and it had a lot of information in there that I didn't know about, which he had discovered through his reporting, because I think he's an ex-reporter.
Yeah.
And you know, he'd done an amazing reporting job of discovering all these little, you know, the processes that they went through to try and identify the guy, and the process that the government went through, the decisions they had to make about how to do it. Do they bomb it? Do they, you know? And I found it really exciting. And the way Catherine wanted to shoot it was that fly on the wall documentary style that she loves. And I was totally down with that. Like, you know, Catherine wanted as many cameras as she could fit into a room, and I was down with that because, you know, there are times you shoot with single cameras and you really refine the lighting, but in that case, you're covering an action, and you're trying to give the director and the actors the most flexibility in a room without stumbling into C-stands or, you know, doing things that stop them from performing their best.
Yeah, that's in kind of the night vision goggles. Did you guys just like put night vision goggles on the camera? Is that correct?
No, we bought a couple of night vision devices. So I think you can get there are different generation night vision. So yeah. I'm a bit rusty with my understanding of it now, but
sure.
I think we got the best night vision that we could get legally. Because I think you can't exporting night vision anyway. I don't recall exactly, but
yeah,
there are night vision adapters that you can put on your 5D. So we bought some of those. We adapted them to go on the front of the Alexa. You know, the debate on that sequence was always how dark do you make it? Because the reason why the SEALs had the advantage was because they could see in the dark. That's what night vision does. So, you know, the one thing that the SEAL said to me, that the SEAL that we met said to me, he goes, if you ever get raided, your compound ever gets raided by a SEAL team, don't turn off all the lights. Like, that's the worst thing you can do, because you can't see, but they can see you. So he said, turn on all the lights. I mean, no one would in their right mind would do that if they get raided by a SEAL Team 6, turn all the lights. But he said, because that then puts you on at least a relatively equal footing, you know, not that you could ever be equal with a SEAL Team 6. But it was kind of a throwaway joke. But the point was clear. So they had the advantage because it was moonless night, it was pitch black. And there was also a power outage in that area at that time. So they had the advantage because it was black. So as a filmmaker, we had to decide how dark we make that in order to tell the story that it's hard, if not impossible, to see, but also not just be completely pitch black on screen.
Yeah.
Because then you got suddenly 10 minutes of a movie that's just sound, you know, which could be interesting, but I think scared.
It's thrilling. It's one of the more tense sequences, I think, in recent memory. I think that sequence is fantastic. And then you do, I mean, a movie that I think is incredibly underrated is Foxcatcher, which I think is gorgeous. But I also know from reading interviews with Bennett and Steve Carell and Channing Tatum, it was not necessarily a fun experience for them. It was very dark character piece. What was that kind of like for you, kind of putting that together on set? Because Bennett, I think, is a really fascinating filmmaker. He hasn't made a ton of films, but I feel like he knocks it out of the park every time.
Every time, yeah. No, he has that attention to detail that I really respect, and he has a very, very good sense, good taste as well. So you put those two things together, and you know you're not leaving the day without having shot something really good. You know, like be it performance, visually, camera moves, like you've shot good stuff, and because he's the ultimate arbiter, isn't he? So he's the guy that says move on, or let's not move on, or that's not the shot we should use, or so to have that, again, going back to the collaboration, where you know I set up something that's I think really good, and he says that's exactly what the shot needs, or you know what, I don't think that's the right shot. We should be in close-ups for the whole thing, or I mean, it was a dark set. It was a dark film for sure. You know, I think that it was dark. It was dark. I mean, the story was dark. You know, it represented the worst in humanity, and it was dark. So yeah, it was exhausting, but enjoyable. I'm really glad to have done it, and I'm really proud of it because I think, you know, Bennett has cut a beautiful, fantastic movie that I agree with you is underrated.
Yeah. Well, and the other challenge on that one, which you also had on Vice, is these prosthetics, which are incredible, but if they're not lit well, the illusion falls apart. Was that tough for you?
It was. You know, it worked really closely with Bill Corso, who's the designer of the makeup, and we were fortunate enough we were shooting on film. That definitely helped because it took the edge off the prosthetics. You know, Bill and I worked really hard at trying to, because prosthetics are a funny thing because they don't always respond equally to all types of lighting. Like, it's just like a human face. Like, certain human faces don't take front lighting, or if they side light them, they might look puffy, or if you front light, it might show up, whatever. Like it. So prosthetics, the same thing. So trying to find the perfect angle for Carell's character was important, and not underlighting him, not underlay, but not dark, not creating too much darkness for his character, because that's where you're putting a hat on a hat. If you're talking about this guy that's a dark character and you make him dark and spooky, well, I think that's a bit cliched. So we had to light him enough that you see him well enough, and you had to see Carell. I mean, Carell's a master.
Yeah, and so good in that.
I mean, yeah, absolute master. I mean, his work as an actor, I think he's an incredibly underrated actor.
Oh, I do.
To be honest with you.
Yeah,
and I think that, you know, he's done a few roles that are standout. I mean, even Little Miss Sunshine. Remember that? Like his performance in Little Miss Sunshine was fantastic. I mean, yes, he's incredibly successful on The Office, but there's some amazing performances in The Office as well. So I remember when I found out that he was in this movie in Foxcatcher, I'm like, that's exciting. Like that to me was really exciting to see him take on a role that was dark and interesting. Yeah.
And he's so good in it too. And it's insane that he never won an Emmy for The Office, and that I think people take for granted that it was easy what he did on that show, but no, I think that's pure talent.
I think so too, because he works so hard at just watching him with Bennett working on the performance of he had to find that character. That was it just doesn't come. I mean, I love to. What I love watching the process actors go through with the director to find their character. It's like I don't turn up day one and go, right, so I think I should have an accent and I should do this, I should do that. Like it's like that works, that doesn't. It's such a great process that I would love one day to watch on a behind the scenes. And it doesn't seem like these EPKs or studios ever want the nitty gritty of filmmaking to be shown, which I find really unusual, because filmmaking's not all glam and it's a lot of hard grittiness, and I don't know. To me, I'd love to see a making of that delves into the good times and the bad times and those sort of. I mean, one making of it's fantastic is the Magnolia making of. Have you seen it?
I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's so good.
Watch that. I'm a big fan of the ones on David Fincher's documentaries, because they're kind of feature length making of things that get pretty granular in the process on those.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned pressure on the Batman. I imagine coming into the first ever Star Wars spinoff was a little frightening. I'm curious on Rogue One, what were your initial conversations like when you came in, and, what is this going to look like? Because it looks and feels unlike any other Star Wars movie. And I think it's fantastic. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people responded to it, is that it just felt so fresh and different.
I got called to do a meeting with Gareth, and being a massive Star Wars fan, like when I was a kid, not so much when I was as an adult, but as a kid, I was a massive Star Wars fan. So when I heard that Disney had bought it, they were going to make some more films, and Gareth wanted to meet, I was really intrigued, but I was not convinced that I would be able to shoot a Star Wars film. It just would be too. I don't know. It'd be like trying to shoot a story about my childhood. I don't think I could do it in a way that was removed enough to be able to, but still emotionally there. It was that close to myself. So I wasn't convinced I could actually do it. After I did the meeting with him and saw the concept art and heard the story, I was like, I'm the only one that can shoot this movie. Like it changed in the course of about 16 minutes. I remember sitting there having a coffee before I saw anything, being like, I can't wait to meet Gareth. I respect him as a filmmaker, love him as a filmmaker. Monsters was amazing. I'm at Lucasfilm, fantastic. Really happy to be here. But and then I think 16 minutes later, it just went, I have to shoot this film. I can't not shoot this movie, because it just was so rich visually, and the opportunities to borrow off your childhood language that you knew from childhood. I mean, again, I'd watched New Hope 1,000 times, Empire Strikes Back 2,000 times. So all the camera moves, all the sound mixes, all the lenses, all the language that those films had, we were being given carte blanche to pilfer from. Like, in fact, we were being encouraged, because that's a language. Like, that's a language that they created in that era. And together, Gareth and I were going, we need to fully have the right to be able to kind of reference these films and do shots that will remind you of that film, not that rips it off or not that is an exact replica of, but reminds you, gives you the same feel. So we looked at the originals, we looked at them and decided that we wanted to make the Star Wars film that we remembered. You know, if you watch A New Hope, the quality, obviously, you know, it's 1977 film, printed, costumes are a little ropey, you know, like it's
an independent film. It was an independent film when it was made. So
exactly, and it's so funny because we watched it as adults about to make a Star Wars film, saying, "Yep, we want it to look like A New Hope." Like then we watched A New Hope and went, "Okay, maybe we need to do it more like we remember A New Hope, not how it actually was." Because A New Hope, I mean, I remember beautiful white corridors and slick looking black evil bad guys and white stormtroopers. Like I remember all these things. You know, Darth Vader's a little scratched up, and you know, like you said, it's an independent film, but so fantastic at the same time. So we wanted to make the Star Wars that we remembered, as opposed to the Star Wars that was real. So we chose certain things, like we chose a larger format, we chose a Lexus 65, you know, and decided to create texture through the design as opposed to through the film.
Well, and I remember I think it was at Comic-Con the year they showed the concept art and just kind of some soundscapes, but they very much described it as like a Saving Private Ryan feel. Was that kind of in the DNA when you first came in? That was kind of the idea of it.
Exactly. It was, you know, one of the great things that A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back did so well, and Return of the Jedi, they were very black and white films. Like they were very good versus bad, you know, and you know, even White Stormtroopers, Darth Vader, like it was very contrasty as a film, and visually and story wise. One thing that appealed to Gareth, one thing that appealed to me, was the fact that we could make a film for adults that would get so much more out of that film, knowing that we know the history, we know the language, we know the worlds that it's from, but we can sort of add more grey to the characters. And, you know, some of these characters are very torn, you know, like, you know, Jin's father used to work for the Empire and still does. Like there are bad people doing good things and good people doing bad things. You know, that was the Gareth thing, saying we need to delve these characters, we need to flesh out these characters more, which very much appeals to me as a film lover. It was all about character, and less about explosions and less about all this stuff, but is all about character. To hear that and to be able to do it in a medium that is so intrinsic to my inspiration, my life as a filmmaker was bliss, was heaven.
Well, and you know, I know that film, you know, very publicly went through some reshoots. I know Tony Gilroy has said that he had a pretty heavy hand in reshaping the third act. And that's not to say reshoots are inherently a bad thing. Tons of film go through reshoots. Even The Force Awakens, I think J.J. Abrams said, like, they kind of found that movie in post-production and reshoots and putting that together. But I was curious what the experience was like for you as the cinematographer on set, you know, while that's going on and while, you know, they are so significantly retooling the third act.
It was a very important movie, you know, and for the reasons you just said, like it was the first spin-off film. You know, Force Awakens was a very important movie because it was the first film that Disney had, and like these are films that kind of, I think Lucasfilm realized the weight of the responsibility that they had and have actually in these films. They are incredibly important to a lot of people, and you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. You can't please all the people all the time. Like and so the responsibility that Kathy and the great team there at Lucasfilm have was to create movies that are great. And I think that the idea of reshoots, I mean, the idea of reshoots are fantastic because it simply is a case that you edit a movie like they do an animation. Mm-hmm. You edit a movie and you watch it and you say, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's not so fantastic. Let's look at doing that. And to be able to retool a movie and reshape a movie is quite a luxury. You know, it's funny when there's news reports about reshoots and this that. It's like, oh my god, reshoots! Like, no, it's just, this is a luxury that a larger film has, to be able to do that. And so as a DP, as the DP on the film, I was in heaven. You know, like there were things we lost in the edit, which are disappointing. I mean, again, this happens on every movie.
Yeah.
You go, oh, you cut out that beautiful ... like in any film, independent or big, or but what we shot ultimately makes the film a better film. So, you know, it's a film with Gareth's DNA in it. You know, it's Gareth's kind of thing. Tony came in and did a great job. You know, like he said, retooling stuff here and there, and you know, and I had a great experience working with everybody. It was for me, it was it's like a best of both worlds. You know, you get your cake and you eat it too, and you get to fix stuff that maybe the first time you didn't do properly. There were a few scenes, I must say, that I got to shoot again that I was quietly happy about, because I was like, man, I could have done that lighting better on that, and I did. So I didn't tell anybody about that. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I know Tony's working on the Cassian Andor series. Are you involved in the Disney Plus show at all?
No. I haven't had I haven't had time to.
Yeah, sure.
So no, unfortunately not. So,
yeah.
But I know that's going to be great. I mean, again, it's like Lucasfilm has such great IP, and they have got such great people that the universe, the Star Wars universe, is so beautifully deep and complex, and no, it's exciting to see Tony doing that.
Well, and obviously the Disney Plus show you are involved in is The Mandalorian, which just kind of exploded when it released last fall. And it looks fantastic. And then I saw the behind the scenes footage, and like, I watch a lot of behind the scenes documentaries, and I like to think I know how things are made, but it blew my mind.
Good.
The volume that you guys used and the way that the backgrounds are being, rendered in real time. But I did want to ask, I mean, you know, this project was so secretive. When John came to you, how did he describe it? What were the early days on The Mandalorian like?
The Mandalorian is the perfect film at the perfect time, because you have a company like Lucasfilm and ILM, who are innovators and constantly pushing the boundaries. You have someone like John, who is doing the same. Like, I don't believe they'd worked together specifically before this project.
Yeah.
So when you have people that are automatically hardwired to push boundaries and mix up the status quo, and you have the technology with LED panels that are becoming shootable, you have 3D gaming engines, you have all these elements that are there floating. And bear in mind, nothing like this had been put together specifically. Like, there were things like on Rogue One, which effectively was the genesis of the concept with ILM. You know, on Rogue One, we built, if you look at the behind the scenes on Rogue One, we built a kind of a volume. There's around the spaceships, we built a horseshoe and a lid and an uplight. We effectively built the same concept in terms of lighting, but we didn't have real-time 3D gaming engine interaction. We didn't have that because that was 2015. Even though that's not long ago, like, it's long enough ago that the LED panels were 9mm then, and now they're 2.4 on Mandalorian. So that shows you how much the technology has progressed.
Yeah.
In that 2.5 years or 3.5 years. So when I met with John about that, we spoke about what this could be. You know, doing a Star Wars TV show could be very expensive. You know, it could be prohibitively expensive, because Star Wars requires a lot of prop building and a lot of character building, and so we wanted to, with ILM's help, be able to make it a financially viable option to solve all the problems that you have with shooting a blue screen environment. And if you go into a studio without a set, effectively, you've got a blue screen. As a DP, you have to light it of what you think it should look like.
Yeah.
You don't have any reference of what the background looks like. You might have some concepts, but effectively you're lighting it what you think it should look like. You're framing it to what you think it should look like. There's nothing real, as you don't have anything to cling on to. And as filmmakers, we're all used to clinging onto something. Like the difference between a shot that's here and a shot that's there is significant. Mm-hmm. Like the difference between a feeling of an actor here versus here is significant. And when you don't have any of that, you got blue screen and you don't have anything to grab onto visually, it's very hard to do a good job. And so like I said, all those elements, those balls that were in the air were all starting to land at around the same time. We did a little test in, I think, June before we started shooting in October, just to make sure that the concept would work, and it did. You know, there were definitely people that were going, there are better ways to do this, or there are different ways to do this, but eventually this concept kind of won through, and you know, it was a very rewarding experience. It was very there was a lot riding on ILM's shoulders at that point, a lot riding on my shoulders, a lot riding on John's shoulders, because if this technology didn't work, there's a lot of money invested in the hardware. This technology didn't work. If we turn up on day one, everybody's done their job, costumes done their job, everyone knows their lines. We turn up on day one and it does not work, there is no plan B. You know, there was, if the power didn't, if a rat had chewed out the cable to the power, like we did all these problems that could occur, we were trying to get ahead of and trying to preempt. Thankfully, thankfully the worst did not happen, and we always had something to shoot. It might not have been 100% perfect, but we could always wrangle it.
It's incredible, and I think it's in keeping with the spirit of Star Wars. I mean, George Lucas was breaking those boundaries back when he was making A New Hope. I think motion control was something that he kind of helped pioneer and stuff.
Totally, and it was funny because we managed to show quite a few people through the volume. Before I had to leave and go and prep Dune. Before I left to prep Dune, I showed quite a few filmmakers through the volume and showed them how it could work and what it was good for. You know, and I won't name drop at this point, but I could, and I would sound pretty cool if I could. But George,
we've seen some photos. I think the Russo brothers and I saw George Lucas. Yeah,
so I will drop George's name. So George did come, and I showed George through, and it was so funny because all these other filmmakers were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! Oh, this is mind blowing!" And George was like, "Yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is what I wanted to do 25 years ago." Like he was so matter of fact about, yeah, of course it is. Like parallax, of course, yeah, absolutely. Like it's totally. I mean, I could see that he could see it 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But 30 years ago, it wasn't even a spark in someone's eye. It was barely thinkable. So I think he was kind of like, well, 30 years too late, but fantastic. Like, congratulations on achieving, what should be the perfect setup. I mean, bear in mind too, this is version 1.0. Like, yeah, there is this has a lot. LED technology, real-time gaming engine. This has a lot of potential in the future, and I think that people see the making of Mandalorian, and I love when people see it and they have their minds blown because that was the intention. Mm. But I'm already in like version 4 in my brain, like where you've got movable flats and you've got stages that are maneuverable and like create a whole range of set pieces with the technology, I think's totally viable. And I would say watch this space because it's only going to get more interesting.
Well, I know season 2 is wrapped. Was the technology able to be improved for that, or are they using pretty much the same thing?
So season 2, I wasn't involved with Baz Idowan, who took over. Well, he didn't take over. That's a misnomer. Baz and I worked quite closely. It's a very intensive thing as a DP because it involves pre-lighting loads and investigating LED panels. It was very, very, very busy time in pre-production for something that hasn't been done before. So that was a big part of the thing. So Baz and I worked sort of hand in hand a lot to get that season done. So when I left, he then took over the reins and shot the remainder, and then he shot season 2. But yes, they did, I believe, make some improvements. There was a couple of shape improvements that we learned. And I think on season 1 we had different panels on the roof versus the wall based on availability. That was solved. The way it was mounted, there were some technical things that they solved as well. So yeah, I believe they did make some improvements. But again, I mean, I see a world where almost every film will use this technology in some way, shape or form, be it from a $200 million blockbuster down to a $2 million independent movie, using it for one sequence that they dry hire a studio that's already been built and they get in there like a location. So I believe that when the technology kicks on and gets widely adopted, when people understand what it can do, I believe it'll be used quite a lot.
It's incredible. I would be remiss if I didn't ask what it's like to light the child or Baby Yoda. And was there any idea at the time that this character was just going to absolutely explode?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cute.
It just became this entirely, like, there's the Mandalorian and then there's Baby Yoda.
I know. It didn't fully surprise me. I tell you what, it kind of didn't surprise me. I knew that it was going to be a thing. My kids came to visit the set, and I specifically made sure that they did not see the child.
Oh, interesting.
Because I knew, first of all, the first thing they'd talk about when they went back to school would be Baby Yoda. And this is obviously 6 months before it comes out, and that would be a disaster. And also that they'd love it. And my daughter right now, she's really a bit annoyed with me about that because she wanted to give Baby Yoda a hug. And anyway, one day in the future. But to light Baby, I mean, listen, it's to light any prosthetic ultimately, and John very cleverly kind of suggested and kept suggesting and recommending, a bit of backlight on the fuzz on the child's hair, and just little things to help kind of make it less rubbery and more real.
Yeah. One thing I am super curious about the volume, what is the post-production like? Because you said, this was 6 months before it came out, you were shooting. And I know for George, one of the impediments for him in bringing a live action Star Wars series to life was that it was just cost prohibitive and it would take forever for the post-production. How much is done there, like in camera on set? And what's the post-production like in terms of finishing out those effects?
In theory, most of it's done in camera. You probably need to speak specifically to the post supervisor because I don't know numbers.
Sure.
But I know for a fact, again, when I was putting together a demo reel for the visitors that came on set, that none of that was post produced, and it was all in camera. And the stuff that I was able to bring out to show people were like, that's straight off camera. Like it's graded and that's it. There's been no post work done to it. There are times where if you're doing a wide shot, you're actually seeing the seam of the volume, the seam of the edges, and the seam at the top. And there were some very simple fixes that ILM had to do for a lot of it. But again, you probably need to talk to them. But you can effectively edit a TV show that's all in camera. There's very little blue, so you can effectively watch the film, watch the show before post-production's touched it, and you've got a really good idea of how it looks.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Literally,
all they're doing is tidying up. That's the ultimate goal, is that all they have to do is tidy up the edges.
That's awesome. I know you probably can't say much about this, but Dune, I cannot wait. I'm a huge fan of Denis' work. It seems like he only works with the best cinematographers who are alive right now. So, I mean, I think it's a testament to that he reached out to you for Dune. But what was that experience like, and what can you tease about that sci-fi epic?
I can tell you that Denis is a master and a lovely human being who is passionate and wild and sensitive and loving. And what I love about Denis is French Canadians and Australians tend to have a lot of similarities in that we tend to get a little bit we can get a bit passionately aggressive when we need to be. Like it's like the French Canadians can be very, very passionate about life and things, and so I found getting along with him really well on that, and Patrice, the production designer, because I think we all had the same thing. If something wasn't good, we'd be like, that's bullshit. Patrice would be like, great, that's shit. We're like, yeah, okay, sorry, you're right. It could be better, and they wouldn't pull punches, which I found awesome, and we had the same relationship. So, what can I tell you about the film? Well, you've seen some pictures. I mean, the pictures are starting to come out, and it was quite an adventure visually. It was a beautiful experience making it. The people involved in it, were just like overwhelmed with. Some of the actors, as well as being insanely talented actors, were just lovely, lovely people who, I've become very close to since then. Working on a few little side projects with, which I can't talk too much about, but yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. Really interesting.
It looks incredible. I know the plan is to do a 2-part. Is the kind of scale of this one pretty large, pretty vast, or is it kind of like a setup for the second half of the story?
It's a fully formed story in itself, with places to go. So it's a fully standalone epic film that people will get a lot out of when they see it, and it's a standalone film. They'll get a lot out of it. So.
Is it interesting for you, coming from Rogue One and The Mandalorian, which are sci-fi stories, but very much you're working in an established sci-fi universe, that to then go into something like Dune, which is also sci-fi, but now there are different rules in terms of what the production design of the world looks like, what the costumes look like.
Definitely, it was quite fun because I had to forget a lot of Star Wars when I was making Dune. It wasn't hard though, because Denis and we started speaking very clearly about how the film should look and should feel, and the formats and the this and the that. So it was not hard to swerve and change lanes. There were some similarities, like the deserts and the this and the that. Like, I mean, listen, ultimately, I'm positive that George Lucas is inspired by Dune when he wrote Star Wars. I don't know if that's sacrilegious to talk about that, but listen, there are a lot of similarities in some areas, so he was definitely, you can tell that he was definitely influenced by that. So I had to be careful doing both of those things that I was interested in doing, of not to repeat myself, but also not for the sake of the movie, also just for fun. Like I hate to do the same thing twice,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. I mean, you're one of my favorite DPs working today. Just such a huge fan of your work, and I appreciate you being so candid about all of these different great projects that you've worked on.
I appreciate it, mate. Good to chat to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I hope you stay safe, stay sane, and best of luck with the Batman whenever that comes back, and it's safe to start rolling cameras on that again.
Nice. Thanks, mate.